For 40 years, the killer walked free. The evidence sat in a storage room gathering dust. Then a new detective with fresh eyes reopened the case, and what he found would change everything. When Deputy Assistant Chief Marco Reyes first walked past the archives, the fluorescent lights flickered over stacks of yellowed case files, each one a silent witness to the riot of a decades-old mystery. He paused at the faint, oil-slicked table that marked the corner of the old evidence vault, a cubby marked Case 47 unsolved. The dust motes dancing in the beam of the single bare bulb suggested years of neglect, but in the margins of a handwritten note, the name Lena Mae Thompson glowed faintly in a child's ink spelling. Lena's disappearance in 1983 still haunted the local police academy's introductory lectures. Rice, a seasoned investigator with a knack for linking disparate details, had spent 10 years dissecting cold cases before this moment. He began with a timeline. On a Tuesday in March 1983, Lena walked into the downtown cafe, the Queen's Cafe, to meet an acquaintance about a rumored burglary. Witness accounts, recorded decades ago by a bartender named Tommy "Gimp" Garcia, fluttered into his notes. She left in a blue blouse, no jacket, her hands trembling like Zomion been told something awful. Garcia, now retired, remembered a faint scent of citrus and something metallic, like gun steel, that lingered in the air. Reyes combed old surveillance footage, but a reel from that night had turned grainy to absolute gray. He dug deeper into the evidence folder, uncovering a single vial of blood, preserved in a glass cylinder, labeled partial. When he ran the DNA, it matched DNA profile number 5802, an unknown male whose details only surfaced in 1999 after a false alarm in a bank. Reyes double-checked the original autopsy report. Lena had been found in the river, her head wrapped in a tattered floral scarf, the river's current running narrow because of a diversion in 1983. No murder weapon had been recovered, but a white-knit glove was found at the spill site, a glove that had never been catalogued properly. The microscope revealed a rare print on the glove, a shoe sole with a distinctive heel pattern 8AB, never before recorded in the state database. The detective cross-referenced case files and found exactly one match, a burglary kit description from the 1990s involving a burglary chain reaction with a brand of Kool-Aid spillage. Historical journals about the Chicano art walk recalled a store owner named Miguel Serrano who had been arrested for shoplifting in 1981. He had a driver's license with a true truck license plate number that matched the ladder closet in the archives where the glove was stored. Night fell. The rain tapped on the slab of the basement, a steady thud that pressed the detective's thoughts into a rhythm. As Reyes pulled the glove from the case file, the air smelt of old paper and something faintly metallic, as if the decades had turned the evidence into a pocket of time. He lifted the glove carefully, sealing it in a new bag to preserve the tiny fibers of the heel print. He stared at the document beside it, realizing the truth. The killer, unknown for 40 years, had lived in plain sight, leaving a breadcrumb that had been overlooked, misfiled, or simply forgotten in a dust-laden storage room. The evidence, once dusted, was now a bridge back to justice and a revelation that would ripple through the town's history, altering the narrative of what it meant to walk free. In 1979, the body of 22-year-old Susan Morris was discovered in a wooded area outside Portland, Oregon. She had been strangled. Despite an intensive investigation, no suspect was ever identified. The case went cold within 2 years. It would remain frozen for 4 decades until a chance discovery brought it back to life. The discovery occurred on a humid, overcast July afternoon when a volunteer for the local reforestation group, Marty Briggs, was clearing a ridge that ran along the northern edge of the South Hills forest. Briggs paused when a shivering gray hollow creeped out of the brush near a trunk of old pine. The body was partially draped over the bark, eyes wide open, and a faint sheen had formed across her scalp from the cold. A nearby crumbled footpath, just 3 feet from the trunk, suggested that the victim had been walking this route. Her footprints were cleared by the wind, but a single, hard-pressed print remained in a patch of moss, identifying it as a human left foot, Vollsitze 9. Local police were called at 4:12. Officers arrived to find Susan's red windbreaker unstrewn by the mud of her knees slid off her limbs, as if she had been dragged or had slipped in tragedy. Her black boots were missing. A shallow bruise, a dark gum at the base of her neck, and a faint crescent scar, likely from a previous strangulation attempt, lined the base. The windbreaker had a faint black tear along the shoulder seam, almost invisible amid the reddish stain of cardamom dust. The forensic team examined the scene meticulously, noting that the only traceable odor was the lingering scent of pine sap and damp earth, with no discernible scratches from a weapon on the scalp. Witness accounts were layered and curious. Mary Johnson, a lifelong resident of 2724 Oak Lane, recalled hearing a strange, muffled cry at 9:30 abends, a sound she insisted was not the usual nighttime choir of owls. Her neighbor, Harlan Hall Peters, recounted peering into the gloom of the woods from his shed and seeing a flash of light from the tip of a flashlight. "I heard a hiss," he said, like something was being dragged. A local bartender from the Trish's Tavern named Kim Odell also spotted someone in a red jacket, lean hunting, 2 blocks away from the trail. Though no one could describe the scent of the assailant, most agreed the victim's clothing was unequally pulled up, indicating violence or a struggle. During the initial investigation, the police team collected a handful of physical clues: a torn, blue fabric from a duffel bag caught in a bark crevice, a chewed cigarette case, its remaining ash still in a dark, uneven residue, and a single nylon fiber from a strange black tape that moved with the minor breeze. The fiber analysis, conducted at the Portland State University Crime Lab, matched no product catalogued at the time. The missing black tape was later traced to a small black trenching line in the walls of a remote industrial parking lot. Constrained by budget limits, the police only pursued a single lead, Susan's ex-boyfriend, who had left town the year before. He and his alibi were solid, leading the prompt but tentative closure of the case. 2 years later, in 1981, a short notice appeared in the Oregonian's crime blotter, "Case of the Dead Woman in South Hills Forest resolved, no suspect arrested." The announcement coincided with the inauguration of a new division within the Portland Police Department, one that demapped many older unsolved cases. The National Forensic Genetic Database did not recover Susan's DNA profile until her 40th birthday in 1997, a forged match found by mistake in a charity raffle for missing persons. By then, memories had faded, the red windbreaker was still wedged among brush, the black boots remained lost, and the village remained unsettled. Fast forward to the present, the case reopened when a taxidermist, working in the same forest for a vintage hunting show, support pollinations.ai Kirschblüte @ Kirschblüte powered by pollinations.ai free text APIs. https://pollinations.ai/redirect/coffee to keep AI accessible for everyone. Susan Morris was a nursing student at Portland Community College. She worked part-time at a local diner to pay for her tuition. Friends described her as kind, responsible, and cautious. She was last seen leaving the diner on the evening of November 1979, after her shift ended at 10 p.m. Her car was found in the parking lot the next morning. She was reported missing by her roommate when she did not come home. The diner, a brick-lined staple on Pine Street, hummed with the clatter of mugs and the hiss of the old stove that night. The waitress on duty, Maribel Torres, recounted that Susan lingered over a steaming pot of coffee after closing, reviewing her class notes on a battered notebook. "She always stayed a bit longer when she had a question," Torres said, voice tinged with that mix of fondness and unease. At 9:45 abends, Maribel asked Susan if she recalled any contacts or plans for the next day. Susan nodded and, after a brief exchange about her busy weekend schedule, they partook of the final rounds before locking up. At 10:02 abends, Susan left the diner, a brown canvas tote in hand, brightened by a dim amber glow from the streetlight outside. Witnesses on the sidewalk, including occupant Mark Rogers, noted that she moved at a deliberate pace, her head glancing back toward the building as if double-checking that no one was tailing her. Rogers remembers the salty scent of the sea mixing with the faint musk of the diner's leftover coffee. The last sliver of daylight faded as she walked toward the rented parking lot behind the establishment. The following morning, 7:15 morgens sharp, neighbors reported a sudden chill over the typical wind-kissed street. At 7:34, the neighbor's son, Eric, was on his phone when he spotted a black 1978 Honda Civic parked in the lot with its driver's side window up. The car bore subtle, Wässerstein scuffs along the lower right door, a telltale imprint of a possible hurried push. When the external door handle was opened, a single cling of torn fabric matching Susan's navy pea coat was found tucked into the seam of the seat. Forensic analysts later confirmed that the fabrics weave matched the coat that Susan owned, recovered from her locker at the college's gym. The door's ignition key slot displayed faint, almost nicotine-stained fingerprints, an odd detail that later suggested someone inside the vehicle had been there. At 8:02 Uhr, the campus police arrived. They noted the minor dent on the vehicle's front bumper, close enough that it could have been a result of a soft collision. A scrap of torn nylon from a work apron, from the diner's kitchen, was found strung along the lower edge of the car's rear hatch. The investigators noted that the nylon's weave differed from the skinny, synthetic material used in standard diner aprons, a clue that perhaps a malfunctioning tool had ripped the fabric. The park beyond the lot also posed a microclimate, a rust-tinted slope that some locals joked was the parking lot slight. Susan had often taken her night shift staple snack, an iced banana, in that precise nook. On the morning after, a discarded paper towel, taped to a lamppost, was found containing a half-peeled banana, its corona thorn stubs intact. No other dentable food items were seen near the lot. The banana paper could point to a hurried movement across that lip or perhaps the injured fruit she carried back. At 10:45 Uhr abends on November 2012, Howard Hawk McKay, someone who drove the late freight truck for a nearby meat supplier, reported channeling a translucent, smoky figure at the parking lot. Noted detail: an error in his navigation system had rerouted him over the alley behind the diner that night. The figure paused at the edge of the lot, watched his headlights wash over the empty patience of the lot, then slipped away into the mottled shadows of Oak Street. He was not aware of any other presence that night, though the eerily silent chill painted by the wind tells a different story. With the original location details, the commuters and pedestrians had no memory of a stranger's sudden strides, yet the blueness of the parking chunk's early morning frost clung to the soil, marking a place where no footfall wore truant tracks. Days later, when Susan's roommate taped a desperate photo of her bedroom, an unmade bed, her phone blinking too. Hikers found Susan's body on November 2018, 1979, in Forest Park, 6 miles from the diner. She had been strangled with her own scarf. Her purse and jewelry were missing. Forensic evidence recovered from the scene included hair samples and partial fingerprints, but no matches were found in any database. The medical examiner determined she had been killed within hours of her disappearance. Inside a cold, pine-laden clearing, a trio of local hikers, Jack Turner, 34, of Willow Creek, Maria Lopez, 27, a university teacher, and Ethan Brooks, 22, a part-time guide, stumbled upon the silent figure propped against a gnarled oak. The chill of November seeped through the thin layers of clothing, turning the air crisp and the shadows long. I almost missed her, Maria whispered, her breath fogging like a cloud in front of her face. I was only half a mile from the parking lot, she recalled, the memory oddly steady amid the forest's hush. Susan's, a 25-year-old graphic designer from the city, had vanished the previous evening after what acquaintances described as an ordinary outing for coffee and a quick photo walk to capture the sunset over the park. She texted, heading out to grab a latte at the diner, and never replied, a passerby recounted. The last call to her mother was a frantic, 13-minute ring before silence settled over the line. Police arrived quickly, their boots crunching on the littered path. Officer Delgado, first on the scene, noted the absence of any items in Susan's backpack, a canvas satchel packed with sketchbooks, a wallet, and a gold necklace, a detail later flagged as a crucial clue. The perfunctory state of the campsite suggested time was of the essence. The snow-bumped briar brushed her hair. Cohen modeling of cold air often indicates the body had been there for less than a day. At the site, forensic specialists found strands of dark, curly hair, short, about 4 inches in length, clinging to the underside of the scarf, a thick, navy blue knit that matched a piece in her wardrobe catalog. The hair bore microscopic vellus fibers, hinting at a human source, but DNA profiling, a burgeoning technology at the time, could not find a match due to limited databases. Fingerprints were partial and smudged, caught on a Moscoverite stone. The prints were categorized as an incomplete left-hand pattern with prominent ridge endings, but attempts to cross-reference them with known criminal or missing person registries returned empty. The inability to match the prints became an ominous threat, hinting that the perpetrator had either fled before being logged or possessed a unique collection of prints not present in the system. The medical examiner, in her final report, underscored the swift passage from death to discovery. The laryngeal structures indicate strangulation by constriction with an elastic band, she wrote. Post-mortem changes reveal death occurred within 6 to 10 hours of disappearance. The hourglass of time, both literal and figurative, added a chilling rhythm to the case: the day Susan's went missing, the day she was found. The narrow corridor between life and death marked by the rustle of leaves and the ticking of hands on a watch set to 7:42 abends at the time the case stalled. No suspect emerged from interviews with the diner staff or the cafe staff who remembered a woman fitting Susan's description as she left early that evening. No matching DNA was extracted from the scarf or the hair, not in the public databases, and no fingerprints could be matched. Still, every strand of evidence, no matter how slight, was catalogued meticulously: a canvas satchel, a gold chain, Neviscarf fibers, partial fingerprints. Officers walked the same footpaths decades later, the trail dampening under unrelenting snowfall, shadows lengthening, as if the forest itself tried to recall the fleeting, unforgiving moment when a life was pulled shut, enclosed in a scarf and ensconced in the chill of a November day. The original investigation was thorough for its time. Detectives interviewed over 200 people, checked dozens of alibis, and followed every lead. A suspect sketch was circulated based on witness descriptions of a man seen near the diner that night. Several men were brought in for questioning, but all were cleared. The case was officially classified as Kalt in 1981. Starting with the scene itself, on the evening of September 2014, 1978, local kickoff night at the Green River Diner was bustling. The air was thick with the smell of espresso and fried dough, the neon sign flickering above the door, a glow that vanished a half hour after the clock struck 11 Uhr abends. The victim, James Jim Keller, 34, lingered by the bar for a second handshake with a friend. Witnesses reported a tall, lean figure in a blue windbreaker and black cap pass him, offering a stranger's eye glance before disappearing into a nearby alley. The first victim, Fritz Muller, body later found in the alley's trash chute, wood of the local firehouse when his body was located. When the first bodies were recovered at the crime scene, detectives from the Metropolitan Police Department, led by Detective Lillian Guzman, Sergeant, early 1980s, swept the neon-lit locale. She noted the spread of the 4-hour small tinted ring where the two victims were suspected to have been strangled. In the kitchen, a heavy grocery bag was found, shoe prints, impressions left upon the floor, characteristic stiletto-like footprints. Police inadvertently preserved a section of the hardwood that revealed a faint smear that xenology confirmed was consistent with blood type AB negative. Their first round of suspect interviews consisted heavily of employees. The barber shop from the adjacent street, a petty shopkeeper that night, claimed never to have seen the ascended figure. The grunts of the popcorn vendor at the diner on 4th convinced them to examine the crime scenes each night, leading to a pattern in the location of bodies. At the diner, over an hour after the murders, the flowering berry that had been left on the back of a chair by the dead body was still present. The forensics department pinpointed it was several months old. That organic residue helped them estimate that the crime likely occurred between 10:30 abends and 11:20 abends that night. By midnight on September 2015, the cross-referenced alibi review had eliminated 9 men who were later never seen again. They were all owners of a chain of hardware, but their names were lost in a whacking of ink. Police then culled a suspect sketch by November that was shown to 15 different times in the homemade sketch and in local spin-out city wall poster. The suspect drew a half-body, the face, a wristwatch with adhesive oil stains, and a gait pattern strongly resembling a lurch. As a consequence of a broken leg it was set. In early 1979, detectives tried to treat the case differently, chanting thorough canvassing for any possible intel. They strung upon evidence of a crime scene to an investigation of a crime spree of homicide victims. A list of leads adhered to a euro in the case on the inside. In its final filibuster, mentions adjacent these paragraphs came from an investigation called Terrorism around the time of a make of a crime, breed firmly on the next flag or recent convict records and the like. Police repeated this exercise 12 times before defaulting call an accepted potential moment in the case. In 1981, under a formal, collapsing winter when no further evidence could be found, the event record went sealed under the cold trail as the discovery of it was lost in donation. All rolls were closed, and the allegations became one of them visible on the Cold Case Archive. Even if some witnesses later updated their accounts later, the investigation existed already at the CDI's last minute in speech about how the investigative actions impacted the investigators' remit. The result is a resumed cursory witness account but no straightforward answers. In 2019, Detective Maria Santos reviewed the case file as part of a cold case initiative. She noticed that evidence collected from the scene, including the hair samples, had never been submitted for DNA analysis because the technology did not exist in 1979. She sent the samples to the state crime lab. The DNA profile matched a man named Dale Cooper, who had been arrested for assault in 1985 and whose DNA was in the system. Cooper had lived just 2 blocks from the diner in 1979 and had been interviewed during the original investigation but was dismissed as a suspect due to what was then considered a solid alibi. A deep night stroll down 5th Street on the afternoon of June 12, 1979, unfolded for the townspeople as a familiar hum of the local diner's neon sign and the occasional clink of cutlery. At 2:40 nachts, Sheriff's Officer Tom Gwynn remembered a sudden pause as the lights flickered, followed by a low, distant scream that cut through the otherwise quiet air. Gwynn later testified that the scream sounded like a woman's, desperate and reached for help. The anonymous call received by dispatch at 2:44 nachts prompted a swift, nervous dash to the scene, where a middle-aged man was found slumped over the back counter, an oil slick wind burned a mile from the burner. The hair samples collected from the diner's cracked tile floor were dark brown, approximately 2,3 inches long, with a flattened hair shaft indicative of a barber's scissors. The forensic technician noted a faint, broken strand within the group's front, likely a vestige of a victim's comb. The samples also contained a graying spine of hair, barely half an inch, that seemed deliberately placed, as if left as a chilling message. Additionally, a small pile of wood chips, about the size of a fingernail, was traced back to the wood frame of a nearby abandoned store right next to the Pullman Hotel. Timeline details from the night of the murder revealed that the diner had extinguished its 2 griddles at 2:20 nachts. A silent, half-lit kitchen marked the end of the day's service. At 2:22, a cautious, damp hand tucked a mug of coffee onto the counter, leaving a faint, gritty residue of sugar crystals. By 2:34, a cartridge of the diner's bourbon, the same black stovetop cap that matched the victim's flask, was missing and later recovered in a neighboring alley. At 2:38, Miguel Ortiz, the town's gossip columnist, swore he heard the door slam behind him. He was pressed for the location of his written notes. None were found. The detectives team considered. Further investigation revealed that Cooper's alibi had been provided by his girlfriend, who later admitted she had lied because Cooper threatened her. In 2021, Dale Cooper, now 67 years old, was arrested and charged with the murder of Susan Morris. He was convicted based on DNA evidence and the recanted alibi. Cooper was sentenced to life in prison. He died in custody in 2023 before his appeal could be heard. The calm of the Midtown apartment complex on the night of March 7, 2001, was shattered by the silence that followed the discovery of Susan Morris' body in the bathroom. The victim, a 32-year-old graphic designer, was found seated in the shallow corner, her eyes wide as if still watching something beyond the room. The scene was quickly sealed by a CTK-9 unit that found a faint, bitter odor, carmine and metal, sticking to the tiles. Within hours, forensic technicians swabbed the urine-stained floor, the cracked porcelain tub, and the tape-rapid door handle. Microscopic threads of blood spattered the shower curtain, and a gloved handprint, a partial, Kniefekut pattern, was captured on the refrigerator door. The surveillance footage from the building's lobby was shaky, but a patch of darkness in the hallway captured a shadowy figure later identified as Dale Cooper. Witness Ana Ramirez, a night shift nurse, swore she saw a man with a shaved head and a chipped fifth tooth, hurriedly entering the block from Stewart Street around 11 Uhr abends. She watched him vanish into the mass of low-light pedestrians. The police timeline ran as follows: 1. March 8, 2001 Koopas release. From the hospital after a routine Anklevon check. 2. March 10, 2001 Koopas first interview at the precinct. He claimed he had left his apartment at 9 Uhr abends to meet his girlfriend, Lana Harmon, at a nearby bar. 3. March 12, 2001 Lana's statement confirmed the same. He told me I was late, but he did say why. 4. Mai 2001 A second interview of Cooper ended abruptly. He wrote a brief note, "Leave now, because I don't trust Yuri playing with fire." 5. June 2003 The city's homicide unit received an anonymous tip that had been whistling for months. Evidence was re-examined, but DNA could not be linked to a suspect. Fast forward to 2020, a cold case recon office uncovered an old Greyhound, a 2003 dated brunette sample from the scene, highly degraded. Using a sensitive polymerase chain reaction, PCR, assay, detectives amplified a fragment at 176 base pairs, which matched Cooper's profile. The DNA swab was found on the toilet paper rolled inside his apartment after a 2006 burglary was cleared. The evidence was a smoking gun, but lacking a direct crime scene link at the time, the case remained unsolved. In 2021, a re-examination of the 2001 surveillance footage discovered a previously untracked overlay, a faint reflection in a mirror that captured a looped choreography of hands. The pattern was a distinct right-handed cut through the wall, confirming the break-in narrative. This new visual corroborated the DNA, and the prosecutors brought Cooper in for a 10-day incarceration on the same day he was arrested. Cooper's girlfriend, described by witnesses as a petite, blue-eyed woman accused of a sudden temper, alibi in court. "He threatened me, I'd lie, or he would beat me," she testified. The court noted that the kitchen argument photo, taken by a neighbor, showed Cooper visibly shaking between each sentence, his hands slightly trembling when he told her at 10 Uhr morgens, a stark contrast to his earlier calm incarceration. The courtroom atmosphere was tense, the air thick with the anticipation of a man whose face faded from public memory into that of a convict. The judge, citing the Metro DNA unit's definitive match, declared the verdict, life in prison, no parole. In the end, the city's oldest homicide was finally closed, and the ghost of Susan Morris' lulling melody, "Want You," lingered in the psychiatric ward, an echo behind the courtroom walls. In 2023, Dale Cooper succumbed to complications of severe emphysema inside the penitentiary, as the legal teams of his attorneys filed an appeal that would never see the light of day. The door closed one final time on a case that had spanned 2 decades, resolved by forensic science, trembling testimony, and a desperate plea for truth. In the early hours of a drizzly October morning in 1983, the quiet suburban street of Mapleville was pierced by the shrill wail of a neighbor's phone. The call came from 27-year-old Susan Morris, who'd just returned from a weekend camping trip with her 2 children. She described a dark hooded figure lingering behind the nursery, a hand hovering over that same window that Juliet's tiny hand had just begun to lift. Susan's voice cracked as she slipped back into the house, only to discover the window shattered, a note slanted across the kitchen floor reading, "If you want to see your family again," and the silence that followed was worse than the alarms of the phone. Police canvassed the area, but no fingerprints were found on the broken glass, and the note slip paper had been collected at a nearby litter bin, later determined to be fabricated. The city's new forensic lab could not peer into the mystery. By the time that the crime scene entry sticker was removed and a bracelet washed the season, the family sat in a long-term mourning, while investigators, including Detective Carolyn Riggs, faced the crossroads of limited technology and a frantic family. The months that followed were brittle. The cops interviewed neighbors, Mrs. Lang, who thought the window was broken by a drunk in her yard, and young high schooler, Brian Jensen, who claimed a classmate, a runaway named Tony, had been seen near the house. Tony, real name Reginald Torres, was found 10 years later in a New York foster system. He had no recorded relatives and lived off the grid. It almost seemed obsession. The investigators pursued his rumored movements, only to come up empty as his captors had destroyed any trace of the night. In 1988, with the veil of time thickening, the case transferred to the Staates Cold Case Unit. William Cole, detective in the Cold Case Unit, sifted through decades of audio, Susan's battered shouting from the phone, the faint Gata-light from the house. He licensed a small forensic lab to examine the missing Reservet-200-212 tissue, the scratch, the remains of a cigarette butt. They found nothing. The case stalled. Fast forward to 2018, the new DNA techniques, especially touch DNA and low template analysis, arrived, and the investigators revisited an old fiber sample, collected from the window frames on a toddler's clothing left behind in the bedroom. With the aid of a digital microscope, forensic specialist Dr. Elena Sanchez saw the fibers on the clothing, a microfiber of generic polyester, but the unique weave pattern could indeed match a prototype used in a small industrial fabric line in Concord, a factory that closed down in 90. The nearby city council still had the license drawings, where the same polymer composition had been coated. The break came in March 2019. A private investigator plied a nearby retiree, who had once worked at the factory, and learned that the microfiber came from a rare batch used for Seamguard clothing. In that same week, the birth records and a hidden ledger in the Factoris records unveiled the name Reginald Tony Torres, a guard who what do? What do you think? Let us know in the comments.